Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to this episode of the Murder Part. Tonight we'll be looking at the case of Anni Dewani. We'll get started with introductions. I'll start with Jeff.
Hi, my name is Jeff Pincin, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Delaware and Pennsylvania, specializing in the treatment of OCD and other similar disorders. And we're not going to do questions this time, most likely, depending on how long the video goes. But please leave a comment or a question. We may respond in future episodes. If I was not a counselor, something I really wanted to do was be a taxi driver that takes tourists to seedy areas. Turns out that very few people want this service. So turns out I'm not really going to make a lot of money out of doing that. So another broken dream, counseling.
That led to counseling.
Yeah.
Another tough break.
Right.
It's a hard road.
Hard road. Yeah. Hard road. I see what you did there. Taxi. Yeah.
Mike?
My name is Mike Smith. I'm also a licensed professional counselor in the state of Delaware. I focus in narrative therapy and geek therapy, and I'm a self-styled expert in all things geek. If I hadn't been a counselor, what I really kind of, at one point in my life, wanted to do would be a criminal middleman, right? You know, somebody needs services of a criminal, they contact me so they don't, have any direct contact, and I contact the criminals and have them do things. And my whole plan hinged on making immunity agreements for like everything with prosecutors. The problem I found out is they only like to do that like once. So, that threw the whole thing into question because rule number one is don't go to prison.
That's true. That has always been your rule.
Yeah. It's rule number one, don't go to prison. And that ended that dream. And counseling ended up being the fallback.
Man, terrible.
Yeah.
More shattered dreams. So the case of Anni Dewani, this is an interesting case, right? It crosses several countries, although it mainly occurs in South Africa. Mm-hmm. It has many perpetrators and what appears to be a false accusation, although we don't know for sure, but somebody who ultimately was not effectively prosecuted. The case was dismissed. So a lot of different stories from a lot of different people, many of them criminals. Kind of, I would think, a prosecutor's nightmare.
That's probably true.
All the moving parts. So do you have a summary of this case for us?
Yeah, so we're in main people we're dealing with here. Anni Dewani, as you said, got married to Shrien. That consensus on saying that? Shrien?
I think it's probably good to point out in the beginning that this particular episode has a lot of names that we're probably not experts at pronouncing.
Yeah. Welcome back to another part of the murdered pronunciation part.
Yeah, right.
We're probably going. We'll do our best.
This will be extreme edition.
Yes, this will be.
For what it's worth, I did play videos of broadcasts that were available from South Africa, like on the South African TV, like when they put their videos up.
Right.
And I listened to them pronounce pretty much, I think, all of these names. And I'm convinced they don't know how to pronounce them either. It's like they get to that part and they're like, whew. And you're like, what? What did you say? I didn't hear anything. What was that? Go ahead and say that name. Go ahead.
It's like police are apprehended. And then.
Exactly. And they always look so confident when they're doing it. I'm like, you don't know how to pronounce that name either, any more than I do.
I mean, that's probably the point, though, is like, I'm not going to get stuck on the name. I'm just telling the story. I'm moving on. It's because they could probably go through maybe dozens of names per day that they just have no idea. I'm just, whatever. I'm doing it. Not my job to analyze names or pronunciation. I'm just going for it.
Yeah, luckily, the two main characters, Anni, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Anni Dewani and Shrien. So thank goodness we have those two names to work with.
To really rely on, yeah. So Anni and Shrien. We'll go into the details, but they get married in 2010. In October 19th, 2010, go on their honeymoon to South Africa right after that. And it's in South Africa where the issues take place, where the crime takes place. The taxi driver named Zola Tango, he also served as their tour guide. So he was a taxi driver while they were down there and also a tour guide ultimately. On November 13th, only a few days after they got there, Zola takes them to a very bad part of town, Gugulethu. And now he would have probably known that it was a bad part of town, but some sources say that Anni wanted to see just all the parts of South Africa. Her family denies that and says no, she would never say that. So either way, go to this bad part. And they're there at night, so it's dark out there. So bad part of town and at night. So they Annie and Shrien are kidnapped at gunpoint. Zola, the taxi driver, is thrown out of the car. They take the car with Annie and Shrien in it. Shrien gets tossed out unharmed, and they find Annie's body the following day. She had been shot 3 times, I believe, the fatal one being in the neck. And so, like you said, prosecutor's nightmare. A lot of legal stuff happens after this in terms of extradition and fighting that and the actual trial itself, and a lot of changing stories, a lot of things that just don't line up, don't make sense, aren't really sure what's actually happening. So ultimately, Shrien is a suspect in this, but ultimately the case is dropped. He's not charged, and he is currently just living his life. So that's how the story ends. And we'll go into the details of the other men that were suspects in that, and ultimately received jail time. All of them except for one, except for the hotel concierge, I think he was. So those are the main details, but we'll go into more detail from there.
Excellent. Yeah, so kind of winding back in time, we see that there's kind of a story before the story with the family of Anni Dewani. She was born in Sweden in 1982, but her parents were of Indian descent, and they spent time in Uganda. But it was a turbulent time, and at that time, the president of Uganda was kicking all Asians out of the country. So that's when they fled to Sweden. And again, Annie was born. So they had seen adversity in their lives. She, from what I understand, very intelligent, graduated with a degree in engineering, worked for Ericsson, which is this massive telecommunications company. And at some point, I mean, I guess with her age and her culture, she was looking for love. And she thought that London would be a lot better place of finding somebody she had really 2 criteria, wealthy and Indian. I think a lot of it might have been like her family approval, like wanting her parents to like the person too.
And if you have those 2 things, then probably much more likely to have that approval.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a love interest you're looking at, it's hard not to like somebody who has millions. I mean, not impossible.
I mean, regular people do it every day, you know, but you're right. It's
by far the only criteria in engagement. But, you know, if you're looking,
it's hard to look past that one.
It's really attractive feature.
Yeah. It's the only feature which can compensate for physical attractiveness. So the research on why people come together essentially says that physical attractiveness is the only variable that matters. Like, people like to think that they're complex and sensitive and like, oh no, I'm looking at the person in all these different ways. No, you're not. not according to research.
Yeah, we have to initially have an attraction enough to be able to sit down and talk to find out those other things. Yeah. Which is actually where the online dating scene has actually done wonders for things, because people actually get to talk without having to see each other. And then they learn things and then they go, okay.
Yeah, right. That can happen. If people don't see each other, they can become attracted. And that can kind of be like a way to get around the physical attractiveness piece. But people are actually relatively simple when it comes to mating practices. Remarkably simple. I'd say frighteningly simple, really. I mean, especially considering, again, how complex people try to make it.
Right.
Like, no, it's about personality. No, it's not.
We are far more simple than even certain, like the peacock and their complex mating dances and tails and everything.
At least they got all them feathers, right?
Yeah.
They lucked out with that.
They got some art mixed in there, right? But yeah, so money is the only thing that will really effectively sidestep that. And, the more money, the more attractiveness can be compensated for. So I think most people would look at Annie and say that she was quite attractive. Shrien, I don't think as much, but he was wealthy.
I don't think he was quite as attractive, but he's not like hideously ugly that millions is what needs to compensate, but he's relatively attractive.
He was also in her age category, so it wasn't like he was like 30 or 40 years older and something like that. I mean, so, I think many could appreciate why she believed he was a good match at first, but as I understand it, she realized right away that he really wasn't, but she stuck with it. Perhaps because the family, again, engaged kind of with him, and they liked him to some degree. And again, he checked all the boxes. So they broke up and reconnected many times. She was clearly not happy. But for whatever reason, they got married.
Well, I mean, to that point, I can imagine, I don't know much about Indian culture, but from just what I've read, I guess, and anecdotal things from people, I can imagine the kind of pressure that Annie may have felt, even if it wasn't spoken, but the kind of pressure she may have felt to get married by a certain age and maybe even have kids by a certain age, if that's part of it too. But get married to the right person that kind of checks those boxes, even if it's not a good match necessarily, but you know, the money, maybe attractiveness, the cultural thing, he's Indian. So I can imagine that even if even when she realized some red flags, things where she wasn't happy, I can imagine that it might have been fairly easy to look past that stuff and be kind of subconsciously thinking, well, you know what? He's wealthy. He's Indian. He's probably going to get the approval of my parents. I don't really know what else matters. You know, not that she's really thinking that, but that may have been something that really factored into her entire life, her daily living, especially to have such an extravagant wedding as they did. Expensive, extravagant wedding. So I would imagine that that probably happens fairly often in Indian culture, but I know in American culture as well, that kind of have this dream of what my marriage, what my wedding is going to look like, and that's what I'm focused on, as opposed to the person, and that kind of gets lost in that expectation. It's a shame, but I imagine it happens pretty often.
Yeah, I agree. It's not just Indian culture that happens. It happens in America. Happens in, you know, like any number of sitcoms you can watch where people of various cultural backgrounds are just like, oh God, here comes my mother. She's going to want me to get married. Like, and getting the pressure, the family pressure to find the right person, and, you know, a person within social group and things. The biggest meme I can think of is like the Jewish mom thing. You know, when are you going to get married? Putting all the guilt on. But that transcends most cultures. Like, we like to think that we're much more liberal and open and accepting of things, but even the middle class white mom can look at her kids, you know, so when are you having kids?
Right.
When's
my grandkid coming? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, and it does seem that Annie was kind of striving for a perfect life, good education, good job, and she wanted the perfect man to fit in. Now, as it turns out, it appears as though Shrien was, he says, bisexual. I think many other people have commented and said he's gay. He ultimately ended up with a man at the very end of the story and now lives with a man. We don't know what Annie knew, but it does seem like she should have known that, and it seems like she kind of figured it out right at the end.
Yeah.
Maybe right before she was married, or maybe even during the day-long, multi-day ceremony. Because people reported that she seemed detached during that ceremony. It was in Mumbai, India. I think it was very formal with all the like ornate dress and everything.
Right.
Some of the CCTV footage from the hotel they stayed in, the Cape Grace Hotel, actually shows the two of them very, very much like kind of cuddly and happy together, and having some, you know, kissing and having some physical
being very affectionate.
Very affectionate towards each other during that time period, during the honeymoon period, so to speak. But it definitely seemed like the two of them really connected at certain points. I mean, you have a long enough relationship, even as, you know, up and down as it was, they at least had something that drew them together. And it seemed like they were kind of at least affectionate enough that it lends some credence to me, some credence to the bisexual side of things, where he really did care about her and was okay with being with her.
Yeah.
At least in the public image that we can see when he's not, you know, behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's at one level to, you know, for him to like both men and women, And, maybe he's like, all right, I can easily be with either one. His story goes a little bit deeper than that. A series of male prostitutes that were into domination, including one, I can't remember. I got a picture.
The German master.
Yeah, the German master, who's now dead. I looked up his history. He died prematurely. So he would visit male prostitutes apparently pretty frequently. And when one of them, later in the story, when one of them kind of said, no, you hired me, he threatened to sue him for defamation, which only caused others to come forward. No, you tried to hire me too, or you did hire me. Mm-hmm. And that pretty much ended that discussion right there. So it seems like cheating, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
Right? Regardless of with what gender, he was cheating with prostitutes. So there was a lot for Annie to see. And I don't know. I don't know how she could have missed all that. I guess she could have, but that's a lot to miss.
Mm-hmm. She also might not have, and might have just come to accept that this a thing about him. They did have many breakups, so some of those could have been about that.
Yeah. Well, and she texted I think it was on the airplane or on the trip to South Africa, texted her friends like, this is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Something like that. So,
well, to that point, I mean, even if she looked past things, it might have been like, all right, well, we'll get married and everything will be okay. He'll change or it'll be okay and he'll commit to this relationship and whatever. But we would learn later, too, that he would be on some of those gay dating sites or whatever they were during their honeymoon.
Mm-hmm. And right after she died.
Right after she was murdered, too. Right. To the point of what Annie may have been experiencing culturally. Of course, there's a piece for Shrien as well. And we know that this is not just Indian culture, but also American culture as well. But not the lack of acceptance of being homosexual or something other than heterosexual, and the difficulty of coming out to your family, to your friends, publicly, things like that. And so I'm sure there's an aspect of Shrien that he was worried about that. Perhaps didn't want to, didn't know how to, might have been afraid of his family's reaction, of course, Annie's reaction, whether she knew or not, of course. So there's an aspect of that, too, that maybe in his mind, too, he was, all right, well, once I get married, I'll commit to her, and everything will be great. Of course, that's not how it worked out, because of the dating sites and everything else. So I wonder if there was some kind of expectation in each of them. Once we get married, it will be perfect. I think many people have that before getting married. Once I get married, then our relationship will be perfect. In other words, I don't have to work at it. I don't have to maintain this relationship. And it's a false reality for many people before they get married. These Shrien and Annie may not have been an exception to that.
Seems like a complex way to start a marriage, right? To have this whole other sex life and infidelity, and all that pressure and a formal wedding. I mean, not that a formal wedding's any more official than an informal, but it just seems like a lot of expense and trouble. Like they're saying, no, we really want to be together. It's legitimate. Why would you doubt it? Look at all the shiny things, and the dancing. But she wasn't apparently completely fooled.
I think it might be the first time in human history where a gay man married a straight woman to hide the fact that he was gay.
Sounds like that never happens.
It apparently never happens.
Yeah. Well, I think the marriage served different purposes for each of them, right? Yeah. Like she wanted the future, and maybe he wanted some cover to satisfy, like maybe his relatives who weren't accepting of his orientation. So he's like, well, I'll get married. But maybe he rationalized, like, no, I really love her too. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go on these websites, but I really love her too.
Yeah.
And I will say, people develop all sorts of coping mechanisms and skills for stress. And while it probably isn't the healthiest for a relationship, utilizing one of those types of websites just to cruise through what's going on, swiping left or right, might have been what kind of this 2010s before the whole swipe left right thing, but still would have been checking profiles, looking over things. There's evidence that he was logged into these sites, but there's not much evidence he was actually communicating with other people. And, it could have just been, I'm stressed out, so I'm going to, log into this thing, especially afterwards.
Could have been
Like super stressed out, go into this resource, or he intended to not engage in those things, but this is my surrogate for going out and doing this. And I'll use it when I'm stressed out so that I can try and maintain this. Of course, we also we don't know what Anni knew. We don't know whether they had a pact to allow that.
Maybe there was a deal.
Maybe there was a deal.
Yeah.
As long as you marry me and give me a child at some point in the next couple of years, you can do whatever you want.
Perhaps.
Well, that secret, if they did have a deal, that secret died with her.
Yeah.
And the problem for Shrien is that what he was doing, the perceived infidelity, made it look like he had a motive to kill her.
Right.
That's where it really hurt him.
There's a connection there with Scott Peterson as well. After his wife was murdered, or whatever happened to her, he ordered some kind of something on his TV, some kind of
explicit
something, yeah. And that very much for a lot of people, like, well, right
that
after
proves
she,
it.
that proves, or this shows some kind of something. And of course, that could go either way. Mike, you made a good point about, maybe that's a stress reliever for Shrien. Maybe it's just something, whatever. We don't know, of course, but it doesn't look good at all.
It's a really odd stress reliever if that's the case, but
Very true.
I don't think anybody would have questioned it if he was smoking cigarettes. Like if he smoked a pack of cigarettes, after she died, and like, well, he quit smoking 5 years ago. Like nobody would have questioned. Yeah, well, his wife just died. Of course, he's going to smoke some cigarettes. This may be a case where that was a very similar thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing to relate it to, right?
So we see here that they got married to India, like I talked about, Mumbai. They flew to United Kingdom, and then out of all the locations for a honeymoon, they picked South Africa, supposedly because SA was their initials, right? So it was a match. That's a terrible way to pick.
How cute.
You could have gone to South America for that.
I imagine there's a lot of places they could have gone. If you count cities in there as well.
San Antonio?
They could have gone to San Antonio. It would have been a lot safer. I was going to say Santa Fe. That's SF. What else is SF? Anything with sand has the potential, right? I'll have to think about that. They'll come to me.
Yeah, San Allegro, I think there's one.
Is that
probably somewhere? Might be a small town somewhere.
Springfield? If Springfield had a word behind it, you'd have that, right? That was like the most popular name, and
right.
So yeah, that was. I mean, pretty much like dart at a globe. I mean, it was just a strange way to pick a country and
Springfield, America.
Yeah, exactly. Yes,
because nobody knows what state it's in.
Right.
It's in America.
It's in America.
So, there's one called Santa Ana.
I believe it's Santa Ana.
Yeah, there you go. That also would have been safer.
I mean, they had a lot more options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much, again, like a lot of places with San or Santa as the prefix. All those were available. And probably some other places with South, other than South Africa. There are some nice places.
South Anaheim.
Anaheim, California. You could have gone to Disneyland.
Yeah.
So South Africa has some very nice parts to it, right? And it's got some other areas, like around Cape Town, which is where they went to, which are notoriously dangerous. The one statistic, you mentioned, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the area, it's been referred to, I think, as a slum.
Gugulethe?
Yeah.
Gugulethe, yeah.
It's a very dangerous area of South Africa that's not well developed structurally. Like it's a lot of tents and like houses built of cardboard and like disposed of plywood and trash, basically. Not like a proper city, I guess.
Right.
More like a war zone. And very, very poor. Has a murder every 2.5 days. That's staggering.
That's a lot of murders.
For a part of a town.
Right.
That's not even the whole of
Cape Town, right?
The whole of Cape Town. It's not the whole of it. Just that kind of township, I think is what
they call it a township.
Is that what it is?
Refer to it as a township.
Yeah. I mean, I think I heard somewhere that even the police wouldn't go there by themselves. They'd always have backup if they had to go there, which clearly they did often.
You're talking something. We're talking about the level of like Camden, New Jersey.
Yeah.
To have a local reference. No, Camden is not actually that bad, but it's pretty bad.
Camden's a weird one because we go to the aquarium in Camden.
Looks nice.
Fairly often. It does. That area, and I think even there's a Rutgers or satellite campus. I don't know what it is, but it's surprisingly nice. And I'm like, wait a minute, telling me this is Camden? And then one time I had to go to the train station in Camden. I'm like, oh, this is Camden. Okay. So there's like, I think there's a different train station than the one in near the aquarium. But it is surprising how different an area can be, a town can be, just from one side to the other, and how much it can vary in just how it looks, really. And of course, the crime rate, too.
Well, I remember years ago, I don't know if Camden is quite as bad now, but there were definitely areas where the police would not go at night. Just flat out wouldn't go. Right, they would like slowly go when other people join them. They go all together. There's delivery drivers that, for all kinds of companies, that won't go to Camden. They'll go to certain places in Camden, but they won't take it to like where you live. And mischief night, that's not such a thing anymore with surveillance cameras. But when I was young, it was a tradition called mischief night, where
the night before Halloween,
October 30, and people would set fires and let air out of tires and break windshields. Yeah.
teepee houses.
And every year Camden would be on fire. It was like the Gary, Indiana of New Jersey.
I recently heard Gary, Indiana's the saddest place in the U.S. or something along those lines.
Yeah, Gary is a frighteningly dangerous town.
Really?
I've been there a few times, and it's even though it's Indiana, it's a suburb of Chicago.
Okay.
And I remember years ago, I'm talking like the 90s, there were like 6 city blocks of Gary that had been flattened in a riot. Like they're just rubble. It really did look like a war zone. It was incredible.
A lot of trucking stuff that happens in Gary. Is that
the
accurate?
major trucking hub. Yeah.
So mischief night, Camden's on fire. One night a year it gets to dress up like Centralia, PA.
There you go, the town on fire.
The town on fire. Centralia is literally on fire all the time.
It was a coal mining town, I believe.
It was a coal mining town. And it had so much coal underneath of it that a fire started in one of the mines. And it's been on fire ever since.
You just picture some guy like, we're shutting down the mine. Oh, I just want one more cigarette, all right? I'm just going to throw this
Going
match.
out with a bang.
Like 1980, I think, was when the fire started or something like that. Yeah, it's still going.
Wow.
Yeah,
They have no idea how to put it out.
You see pictures of the town, and sometimes there's like a mist, like it's smoke coming off of the surface of the ground. It's pretty eerie. Wow. Probably not good for your lungs either.
Centralia, PA. Yeah. Which reminds me of a movie, a Chevy Chase movie. Chevy Chase, Demi Moore. Oh, I can't remember the name of that movie. It'll come to me. But it's I think it's set in a town similar to that.
Oh yeah.
Where there's everything underneath is on fire.
Oh. That does sound familiar, but I can't think of the...
It had Dan Aykroyd in it, too.
Chevy Chase, Demi Moore, Nothing But Trouble.
Nothing But Trouble. That's it. Nothing But Trouble. It's actually a good movie.
Directed by Dan Aykroyd, too.
I don't know why I think of this, but there was a movie with Danny DeVito in it. It was like a murder detective thing where he was like the local cop in a town. And one of the themes of the movie was that everybody in the town had a Yugo. Because it was some type of experiment, I guess Czechoslovakia was doing, or Yugoslavia, rather, it was doing to promote the cars in America. And everybody in the town everybody in the whole movie, I don't remember the name of it, but it was actually a pretty good crime mystery movie. So, yeah, it was pretty good. Danny DeVito is very talented.
Yeah.
Name will come to me. So either way, they land in Cape Town, and they go to Kruger National Park, which is apparently a beautiful place. They had to fly there, domestic flight. It's a different part of South Africa. They return to Cape Town on November 12th. And on that ride, from the airport to the hotel, they meet Zolatongo. He's a cab driver by day and a moonlighter by night. So he uses I think it was a Volkswagen Savannah. He used it to...
A Chiron.
What was it?
It was a Chiron.
Oh, Chiron.
Yeah.
Savannah was I'm thinking of another case that had Savannah. Maybe it wasn't a Volkswagen Savannah. It was something. So anyway, he would take the vehicle. It was like a little minivan type thing. like an old MPV, Mazda MPV would remind me of. And he would just take cash for driving people around. I don't know if his employer knew it, but that's what he was doing.
From what I understand, a very common practice for tourists in South Africa is to hire a taxi driver for your entire stay, especially if you have a little bit more money, especially when they're tour guides, as Tongo was. It's like you hire them and go, hey, you're going to be here for another 6 days. We want you to be on call for us and take us where we need to go and give us tours, things like that, because it's easier to have one on call than to try and get a new one every day or every time you want to leave the hotel. So from what I understand, that's a common practice, or at least it's told to tourists planning to go trip to do that.
I can imagine if you're somewhere that you're not familiar with, thinking, I want somebody who's local to this area, to show me around, to really show me the actual sites in this town or in this country, rather than just what the tourist sites might be. Now, of course, it could be a dangerous thing, and was in this case, but to an outsider, it might be like, oh, this is somebody who's going to show me what is actually there, versus just what they've built up to be tourist type areas. Other people have made the point that they were staying in a nice hotel that probably would have had services like this, and of course they weren't hurting for money. They had a lot of money, so of course people were wondering why they just didn't. If there was a service available through the hotel, why didn't they just go with that service? It obviously would have been maybe a little bit more. I don't know, put together maybe, or
there
something
was
that.
A very nice car service run out of the hotel.
Hurting for money or not, there's some people who just they thrifty.
Yeah, right. And maybe that's how they got that to that
Some
place.
people among especially amongst the 1% just are really penny pinchers. And it's like, I'm not going to spend any more money than I have to.
Yeah.
I know the hotel has this service, but that's expensive. Like that's what this is. I can pay this guy half of that and get the same service.
And it comes with murder.
Apparently.
Really a huge benefit, right?
For some.
Yeah. A little used perk, but when you need it, right, it's good to have it there.
They keep it off of the brochure, but the real people, they know that it's there.
You just have to know how to ask for it.
The right kind of envelopes to give, all that.
Right.
Yeah.
Which if you listen to the investigators in South Africa, like Anni Dewani knew all the ins and outs of that side of the business.
How about San Andreas? Is that? I know that's a fault, but is that a town?
Probably.
In Grand Theft Auto universe, it is.
Oh, that's true.
It could have gone there.
Just saying,
There you go.
There's a 6 coming out.
Yeah. That was a big announcement, like there. So, it's still going to be a couple of years before that comes
It'll be a
out.
while.
But
They got to build a whole town.
they've got to build a map that's like twice the size of the GTA 5 map, which is just
Jeez.
It just
enormous.
goes on forever.
It's enormous.
Especially when you go up to the north and they have all the hills. The map just keeps going and going. How about South Amboy, New Jersey? Is that a town? I know there's a Perth Amboy. Is there a South Amboy?
I don't know.
I'll have to look it up. I thought there was. Maybe I'm just making up towns.
I mean, you might as well. It's probably
There
somewhere
is.
in the world.
South Amboy, yeah.
Probably somewhere in the world, you could find a town with those names, and you're probably safe with it.
They would have been better off in South Amboy, New Jersey, yeah.
Yeah. Tough to imagine being better off in New Jersey, but you're right.
It's a strange sentence when you say it out loud.
You're better off in New Jersey. Wait a minute.
What? What did I just say?
They could have gone to Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia.
They could have.
They could have.
Yeah, that's a good one. A very good one. All right. So, again, this was November 12th. So, November 13th, they run around a few different places. Zola Tongo takes them out late at night. I guess they wanted to go to a nice restaurant, but instead they ended up going to this not as good place. And people later on will be very surprised they went there. Like, again, if you have all this money, why go there? I think it was in a neighborhood called Strand.
I think that was a case of, like they said, Tongo, take us to a good restaurant that isn't on the main tourist strip.
Sure.
So,
Well, he definitely fulfilled their request at that place. So he leaves them there and then comes picks him up later. And this is where it's a million stories. Who knows what happened? But we do know that Zola Tongo directed his vehicle into the area of Cape Town that is, again, so dangerous that people don't go there in the day, much less at night. They were only there a few minutes, and two people ran up to the car, knocking on the window. At least one of them had a gun. And this is where they pull out Tongo. One man gets in the driver's seat. Another one slides in. It must have been pretty cramped in the back of that.
It was not a big minivan, not a big van.
From what I understand, both of the hijackers are in the front.
Oh, they're both at the front?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I had heard one got in
the passenger side, and one got into the driver's seat. And that's actually pertinent because at Nege's trial, they had him. The testimony of the other guy was that he was sitting in the passenger seat, and he just turned and pointed the gun into the back seat and fired, which the forensic evidence actually says it's impossible. Right. But that was his story. So, like, if they both got in the front seat and drove off.
Mm-hmm. Now, right before this carjacking, they call it a hijack, which must be what they call it in South Africa. I think around here we would say carjack. Mm-hmm. Although technically any transportation is a hijack.
To me, I think when I think carjack, I think of like you get pulled out of your own car and somebody else takes the car, and usually you're left on the side of the road. Like Tongo was carjacked. Shreen and Anni were hijacked.
Yeah, I would still use carjack. Like, there was a case in Philadelphia where a guy got pulled out of his vehicle and there was a kid in the back. Yeah. That was referred to as a carjacking, even when the assailant realized the kid was back there. But yeah, I think that it's different for different places of the world. Mm-hmm. I think of it as a carjacking and a kidnapping together, sure, and eventually a murder. But so he was, anyway, Shreen was texting Tongo, allegedly. The police couldn't support this with any evidence, but they insisted for a long time that he was. They
had a little bit of evidence because they went to the cell phone carrier and were able to determine that text messages were sent at that time from Shreen's phone to Tongo's phone.
Yeah, but no idea of content.
Right. But no idea of content because these hijackers stole Shreen's phone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was never recovered.
Nope.
Yeah, so he could have been sending anything. It could have been empty. It could have been like a bunch of periods and commas. Like, you have no idea what he was.
Could have just been emojis.
Yeah. the carjack emoji.
Could have been, hey, where's the gay nightlife around here? Like, could have been asking those questions. Or, as it could have been about a helicopter ride.
Yeah. You never know. Mm-hmm. Never know what it's about. So, as the two hijackers, their names, let me see if I get their names here. I'm not going to pronounce them correctly. But we know the one, there was a guy, we'll get to the guy in the hotel. That was Bolombo.
Bolombo.
Yeah. And then I think it was Mngeni, right? Mngeni. Colile, but could be Zolile, could be anything.
Zolile, Kolile.
And then
anything like that.
Squambadota Kwabi was the other one. So the two.
It rolls off the tongue, though. I mean, once you practice it, like Zwambadota. I mean, yeah.
Hindlema de Kwabe. Just to keep it moving.
Yeah. So they take off, and as four of them are in the vehicle, Shreen hides Annie's $40,000 engagement ring in the seats, and does it so well the police don't find it till later. Mm-hmm. Like the criminals never found it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's probably the last thing that most people would think of. It just seems so peculiar. Like, you're worried about dying. You're in a terrible area where, if you get thrown out, you might get robbed again or killed. And you're like, you know what? I don't want that ring to
Let's worry about the ring right now.
$40,000 ring was worth more than the car they were sitting in.
That's true.
All of the rest of the stuff that they got off of Anni, her BlackBerry phone, a white gold bracelet with diamonds in it, like her her wristwatch, her Armani wristwatch. Like all of that stuff was worth like $6,000.
Yeah.
Like 90,000 rand, I think is what it was called.
Rand is there, yeah.
Which is a South African currency. But it was about $6,000 worth of stuff, which still pales in comparison to that $40,000 ring.
Mm-hmm.
And if they had seen that ring, like I think that might have been his thought process. If they saw that ring, oh, they're going after it. So if we, hide it,
it could have been to protect his life.
It protects both of them, because then they're less likely to have any violence towards getting that thing.
Do you guys know why the ring was off of Annie? I didn't see that anywhere. Why he had the ring?
I think he grabbed it off her finger.
He took
really?
it. Yeah,
Okay.
I think he did.
Okay.
I think she gave it to him.
Okay. Maybe again out of fear, like you said, like hide this so that they don't try to take it and then kill us or something, perhaps. Yeah.
I think in one of the earlier confessions or interviews, one of them, I think Annie said something about the two of them whispering in the back seat, and then they were told to be quiet. And shortly after that, they tossed Shrien out.
Mm-hmm.
So it might have been
17 minutes later.
Might have been he was saying, "Oh, give me your ring,"
Sure.
Very quietly, just trying to protect.
Yeah. Yeah, so 17 minutes later, they kick him out, and they say, we're going to drop her off in a few minutes, so don't worry about it. It's all good. This might be stressful, but you can trust us.
He said, we're not going to hurt you, or we don't want to hurt you, or something along those lines.
Yeah. As it turns out, you can't trust them. They end up shooting. They shot her in the head one time and killed her. It hit her in 3 places, passed through her hand, apparently skimmed her chest, and then I think entered and exited her neck. That was as you mentioned, the fatal shot. She also had bruises on her inner leg and a few other bruises consistent with a crime of a sexual nature. They denied, and the police denied later on that happened, but seems like it's likely it did.
Yeah.
And that may have been why she was shot. She was resisting, and
or that it was attempted.
that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain it was.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think, given the state of how she was found, I don't think that the act was completed.
No.
I think it was like the shooter was trying.
Right. It was an attempt. Yeah. And there was a witness who saw her body before the police got there, when the police got there, and there was some other evidence they saw that made it seem clear that that's what was happening. So I don't know why the police were so willing to say that was never attempted.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like they would be on the other team,
Right.
But maybe because
that didn't fit with their narrative.
the tourism bureau was like, hey, cool it with the attempted doesn't count, right? we only list completed when we talk to the tourist.
Attempted does not count.
Think about the people that could come here. Yeah.
Yeah. You like your paycheck? Forget attempted.
Which is a shame, of course, because hiding truth or hiding something that could help someone maybe get convicted or help a conviction or even help, be out of society for longer, behind bars longer or something, but potentially, of course, we don't know if this is the case, but choosing money over justice.
Well, that's for the tourism bureau, and I joke, but who knows who was involved? But they hid, I think, that attempted offense, but they couldn't hide the murder.
I mean, I don't want to say to be fair, the investigators had their eye on Dewani pretty much from moment one. Mm-hmm. I mean, they say that it wasn't at first, but one of them said that, hey, within the first 48 hours, they were watching him and were pretty sure that he had something to do with it. So if these people tried to do that, then it couldn't have been what they wanted it to be.
Right. It didn't fit.
It didn't fit with their narrative. So when they got that, like that was, they were looking at him before the postmortem was even finished. And, that showed that there wasn't any direct sign of a completed assault.
Well, the interesting thing, though, is if there was an attempt, that would, what you're saying, right? The attempt would explain why they kicked him out, right? And they didn't want an alternate explanation for kicking him out. They wanted him to be guilty. That's why he left, not got kicked out. But with that attempt, then that changes the narrative to we're like, no, get him out of here. We want to do this. And they wanted Shrien, right? So they needed it to be a simple murder with no other attempted offenses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the narratives that comes up, and and we'll get into it later, like really does go into what that was all about.
Yeah. You don't really. It's like a conspiracy theory to think that tourism was involved, but it's pretty obvious it was. I mean, this is a heinous crime where there's no way of getting around this. There's no way to make this look pretty. Mm-hmm. But one way to not make it look bad on South Africa is if Shrien ordered the whole thing. Sort of. It still looks kind of bad. Right. Like in my other video, I talk about how, like, hey, come to South Africa. You could hire hitmen for real cheap. They barely even know you, and they'll. I think it was 15,000 Rand was the...
Right, but that's still better than if you come to South Africa, you'll just get murdered.
Well, I think it's going to make the spouses of the tourists think twice.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know if you're recommending South Africa, and I'm thinking, let's go someplace else.
Yeah, but that means that's still 50% loss of tourists rather than 100% loss of tourists.
How about South Amboy? We haven't been there in a while. Yeah. So we see that they let the conspirators, the two carjackers, killers, talk to each other. At first, they confessed. It was just them. Mm-hmm. When they talked to each other, they came back and said that Shrien hired them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Each one had a slightly different story. The first one they managed to get was Mngeni. Like they grabbed him up within the first day, I think. Mm-hmm. They had him in custody based on it was a palm print.
Right.
Inside the vehicle. They had him immediately. He gave a statement saying that said he was involved in it and pointed a finger at Kwabe. And they went to go pick up Kwabe. Yeah, and they would get Monday Malombo.
Umbalombo.
And then they would get Tola Zongo. And there's a fifth conspirator that they never arrested, but they have him on audio recording with these guys talking to him. They would never give him up.
Yeah. But before Tongo, they didn't get immediately. Like they had Ngani the first day, Kwabe 2 days after that, and Mbalombo within a few hours of Kwabe, and they each of them gave their own kind of account of things. Kwabe denied for a while. Mm-hmm. Then he gave a statement that he was involved in the hijacking, and then they were all put into the holding facility and got a chance to talk to each other. When they all came out, Shrien did it.
Mm-hmm. I imagine criminals could really get behind that. Like, let's have some time to converse a little bit, get our, maybe get stories right a little bit, and I think criminals would really get behind that.
Yeah, it's all part of the service in South Africa.
Yeah, right.
But then
that's also on the brochure.
It's also on the brochure. It's in the fine print. You got to read it.
It makes the murder a little more tolerable from the criminal side, right?
But they eventually Tongo, he gave himself up. He turned himself in with a lawyer. Like he knew that the police were going to get him, so he turned himself in. And the first thing he said, he said, "I can tell you something important, but we got to make a deal."
Yeah, he did. He got an incredible deal. So this was in the United States. Of course, this wasn't the U.S. In the United States, this would be first-degree murder plus conspiracy to commit murder, and the robbery, and probably another. Well, in states around here, probably another 30 offenses, right?
Yeah.
Driving without a seatbelt on.
Right. Yeah. Possession of a murder tool. Conspiracy to possess a murder tool.
Possession of thieves' tools. Conspiracy to possess thieves' tools. Driving while black. Just
that would be an American thing.
It would be an American thing. Just
yeah. So he was looking at some heavy time, and he ended up with 18 years, which is nowhere near 18 years in their system.
Yeah.
Kwabe, that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, Kwabe.
He ended up 25.
Yeah. And they both got deals to testify in court against their fellow conspirators and against Shrien Dewani.
Yeah, now Malombo, or that's how I'm going to pronounce it.
Colombo.
He was Colombo. He was granted. It's not Colombo, but he was granted full immunity. He was definitely not Colombo. No. But he did manage to get full
He
immunity.
did manage to get full immunity. See, that's what I was talking about. You get that full immunity, and you can just...
Could have been you, Mike.
The problem, again, he wouldn't get it for other crimes.
Right.
Just saying.
I would imagine they would start to see a pattern. Like, wait a minute.
Wait.
He's been talking an awful lot here. He knows too much.
Yeah. Now, Mancini, he was the only one who decided to take it to trial. Mm-hmm. And that was not
beneficial for him.
No. He pled not guilty.
Yeah,
he was definitely part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, but he said that he was not even one of the carjackers. He had an alibi. He also said the police suffocated him with a plastic bag to get his confession, which they may have.
All of them said that the police did things like that, except for Tongo.
I totally believe that they're telling the truth on that part.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Yeah. Like, there are parts like I won't say it definitely happened, but it has an air of plausibility.
Mm-hmm. Now, 3 weeks into, so now Shryan gets arrested, right? And we'll get to that. But 3 weeks into his trial, Ngeni died of a brain tumor in prison. So, sentence served?
Yeah, he did serve his life sentence.
He did serve life. Mm-hmm. He did life.
A lot shorter than expected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Shryan, by this time, he left South Africa within 3 days. And Annie was cremated. So, evidence gone. That quickly. So Shryan was back in UK, and then all this stuff happens. He gets implicated on multiple sides, probably through the police beating some confessions out of people, who knows. And he comes up with all these reasons to not get extradited. Mm-hmm. So obviously you're going to fight extradition. Mm-hmm. That's a no-brainer, especially from UK to South Africa. South Africa has a reputation of not being a great place to go to prison.
Yeah. But what's surprising is that it took as long as it did, because the extradition process between South Africa and UK is actually pretty streamlined and pretty quick. It's like many countries extraditing to the US.
Mm-hmm. Well, his attorneys argued that he wouldn't survive South African prison.
Right.
There was also arguments that he was unable to take part in and understand the trial process because of how deeply he was in depression.
Mm-hmm. And PTSD.
Like he was unable to comprehend what was going on.
Yeah. They extradited him anyway in April of 2014.
It took 4 years. 4 years to extradite him.
And he was charged with murder, kidnapping, robbery, obstruction, and conspiracy. The people that were still alive, the three of them, they testified against him, but not one, or no two of them, came up with the same story.
No.
Seeing the pictures of Shryan from like earlier on in things, and then go to 2014, he looks significantly different. It's obvious that he was, just by amount of gray hair he had, it was obvious he was under a lot of stress, and that it had been a very difficult time for him, whether he was a part of it or not. Mm-hmm. You could see the aging process that occurred with him just over that relatively short period of time, especially with him being as relatively young as he is. So
wait, gray hair indicates stress?
For Shryan.
Oh, okay.
Only for Shryan.
So the prosecution put on their case. Now, usually these trials go to a jury. I believe South Africa has a jury system as well. But the judge entertained a motion by the defense, dismissal outright. She said that essentially the testimony is riddled with inconsistencies. There was no reason for her to believe any of these people.
Her statement, I've got it ready. She said, Mr. Tongo, who was the only witness who could link the accused to this conspiracy, gave evidence to the court which is so improbable and contains so many mistakes, lies, and inconsistencies that one simply cannot know where the lies and the truth begins. I accept that at this stage of the proceedings, the credibility of a witness plays a limited role. But in my view, the evidence of this witness is so replete with fundamental contradictions on the key components of the state's case that I can all but ignore it. In making this finding, I take into account that all three witnesses, Mr. Tongo, Mr. Mbolombo, and Mr. Kwabe, are intelligent people and therefore more than capable of attempting to twist their version to implicate the accused.
Yeah. Pretty harsh rebuke, especially for, a system that many people thought were pretty much rigged against Cheyenne.
Right.
I mean, this was a dismissal. This wasn't a jury acquittal. This was before the trial even started. Before a jury would render a verdict, it was gone. It was over. He was free. That was it. I think they do have the option of retrying him. Although
they'd have to go through extradition.
Right. The difficulty, if he was there, they could do it. But I think the difficulty would be that is double jeopardy, regardless of whether it goes to a jury vote. So I doubt that the United Kingdom is going to extradite somebody into a double jeopardy environment. But he's going to have to cross South Africa off of his travel itinerary.
Yeah, if he does go back there, he'll get snatched up. But the prosecutor's whole thing hinged on their version of his motive and on Tongo's statements. Their motive was that he had entered into this marriage and because of family pressure and couldn't live in the marriage, so he hired Tongo to hire people to kill her
for 15,000
so that he could get out of it. Yeah, it
was like 2,000 or 3,000 British pounds.
Yeah, 2,000.
Yeah,
2,000. I think it was $2,000 US.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah.
So very low.
I actually did the math using the conversion rate from 2011. It was $2,066 US.
Yeah,
or 1,290 Great British pounds.
And Tongo made more than that in a month when you count his moonlighting.
Yeah.
It's a very low amount, for for the seriousness of what happened, if that did happen. A very low amount for the risk that someone would take doing that. Of course, you're risking getting put in prison and even worse. So it's a pretty low amount. It's tough to kind of reconcile that.
Especially when they got more out of the jewelry and stuff that they took. Right. That seems like a really low amount of money to pay for something like that.
Mm-hmm. Shran wasn't even willing to throw in the ring.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, though, if he did orchestrate it. I don't think he did. But if he did, why didn't he just tell Annie to, you don't want to wear the ring. We're going to some tough places. Just trust me, I don't wear the ring. Why take it off and hide it? Because for all he knew, the police would be like, oh, that evidence got lost in my pocket.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very likely, unless he changed his mind in the moment. It was like, wait a minute, I don't want to lose this. He intended to just have him take it, but oh, wait a minute, actually, no, wait, I could sell this, or I don't. Maybe he changed his mind in the moment if that was part of it.
I think he was disgusted with their service.
Maybe.
They're driving erratically. They leave him in the street. He has to wander around to all these places before someone finally had a phone and answered the door. He's probably like, you know what? These guys don't deserve this ring. Give me that ring.
And he knew he couldn't leave a bad review because then they would know it was him.
You couldn't leave a 1-star review on that.
Yeah, then he would just implicate himself, and and they're also hitman, so they could come and come back to him. So,
and the prosecutors were gonna blow up the court with this news that he's a secret gay, relationships behind her back, and he's wanted to come out of the closet afterwards and thing. And Dewani walks in and his lawyer goes, "Yeah, Mr. Dewani is bisexual and he had sex with men." And the state was just like,
the power that the power
what
meter.
Do we do?
Just
what do we do? What do we do? How do we get this? And they still wanted to bring in the Leopold Leiser, the German master, to show that he had these things. And one of the things they wanted him to testify to was that Dewani had said that he didn't want to be in this relationship with Anni anymore. But as Dewani's defense attorney pointed out, that conversation happened more than 6 months before the incident, so could have no bearing on what happened in South Africa. And the judge agreed. The judge agreed that Dewani's sexuality was irrelevant and that Mr. Leiser's testimony was unneeded, and she disallowed the evidence.
I think the affair should have been relevant, not so much who he was with, but the fact that he had alternate sexual relationships. But yeah, it didn't really play a part. This got dismissed based on inconsistencies of the witnesses. So it's definitely, when your spouse gets murdered when you're having an affair, I mean, that looks bad.
Yeah.
Chris Watts, I think a famous example of infidelity that led, fairly directly to murder, in my opinion. There have been a few other cases. Scott Peterson, I think he had, well, not really an affair, but he had a relationship right after.
Right.
Like very soon after. And she recorded his statements with the cooperation of the police. There have been a few other cases. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there have been a few other cases that involved ongoing infidelity, and specifically a man being unfaithful and the wife getting killed.
Yeah.
Many. There's many of them out there. So this is a familiar pattern. I think when they saw him, they're like, yep, this fits right into our murder plan.
There's a lot of things that just look strange, that people on the internet would be happy to point out. Things like Shrien meeting with Zola alone multiple times, both before and after, and the whole giving him an envelope of unknown contents. And at some point, Shrien even looked up at the camera. It looked like he was kind of seeing what cameras were around. Things that, again, may not necessarily mean anything. We don't know the contents of that envelope. We don't know necessarily what they talked about. They may have recovered text from them. I'm not really sure, but they don't necessarily know. And those are the kind of things that don't help his case. They don't really help him to look innocent. However, in terms of evidence for things, it doesn't add or really subtract anything. It just looks suspicious and doesn't really help anything, but there's no evidence to support anything with those details. But I think that the majority, it seems anyway, the majority of people believe that Shrien is guilty and would point to things such as that, like his behavior does not line up with somebody who is innocent in this case. But it's a tough one because there's a lot of people involved and not a lot of really solid answers for anything.
I mean, that's one of the things that the investigators did was with that CCTV footage at the hotel. Was the reason I think they thought it was such a strong statement from Tongo was because they went back and they were able to corroborate, supposedly, all of these points where Tongo had said, I met with him here, I met with him here, I met with him here, and that's when we talked about this, and we talked about this, and we talked about this. But it must have been a super rushed conversation each time, and a super rushed plan, because if you add up all of the time that they spent in the same room alone together, or in the car alone together, or doing whatnot, in over the course of the 4 days, they were alone together for less than 29 minutes. Not even in one stretch. It wasn't even like
total of 29
half hour here, half hour there. No, it was a total of 29 minutes over the course of 4 days. Most of them were 5 to 6 minutes at a time. That must have been really fast talking negotiations, which might be why they settled on 15,000 rand instead of something much, much higher. Tongo got flustered in the negotiation process because he wasn't as good as Shrien was.
Doing the math in his head. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it would have been very rushed. And all the meetings, I mean, like the white plastic package exchange, that could have been just payment for his services.
Right. That's what I was saying. Like if he had initially, the first time they were in a car together where Tongo says that, hey, this is when he said that he wanted to hire me for murder. If that was him getting in the car and saying, hey, I want to hire you to drive us around for the rest of the week, and I'll pay you X amount of money, then, Tongo knows he's smart enough to know that tell the police that's when he said it.
Right.
There's no way of proving what he said, but he can actually say the cameras actually would have seen us get in the car, and that's what he said, and then that's corroboration.
Sure.
But it's not really.
Right.
It's not really corroboration. But yeah, if he'd hired him for some X amount of money, and then afterwards didn't think that Tongo was involved in the plan, why wouldn't he pay him the money that he promised for the services that were given to him? As far as Shrien would have known at that point, Tongo was as much a victim as he himself was, because his taxi got stolen.
He was thrown out at gunpoint.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel really bad about that. I mean, yeah, it's horrible what happened. I am still grieving. It's terrible, but I don't want to, put more hardship on this person who went through this with me.
Sure. Yeah. There's an easy argument either way. This looks suspicious, but there could be a reason for it.
Yeah. I think the authorities wanted to believe. So every time Tongo said, yeah, I talked to him for a few minutes by the car, and then in the hotel, and then the package, they just ate it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He put a lot of faith in him. If he hired him, put a lot of faith in them for only knowing Tongo for a few minutes. Yeah, that's a lot of risk. He could have been killed. They might have said, you know what? We'll take your $2,000 and we'll kill you.
Because they know that he has so much more than that.
He's also a witness.
Yeah.
He wasn't, if he did hire him, he wasn't thinking that through. Mm-hmm. Right? They probably would have killed him.
Right.
Why give him a chance to say, to flip on them?
Right.
Yeah. The other thing that the police came to was those text messages. Like, they knew the text messages were there. Tongo said they were there. And he said that was when Shrien was telling him, how to do things. With Anni sitting right there next to him while he's on the phone, just texting back and forth in the car. And the investigator's like, well, why would you do that? There's nothing you can't talk about out in the open in front of her. But Shrien, at this trial, said that he was trying to hire a helicopter ride for the next day. And he wanted Tongo to get him to the good helicopter ride, but he wanted to keep it secret from Anni, to be a surprise. So again, that's another place where, if that is the truth, Tongo's got more points of where you see we're conspiratorially hiding together and talking about things in secret. Really, what they're talking about is this helicopter ride. Right. But Tongo's telling police we're talking about murder, because his deal of only doing 18 years for this crime that he absolutely was involved with hinges on all of that. Because if he can't stand up to it, if he can't hold up to it, then he risks that deal going away and going to jail for life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can make a good case for Shrien being actually not guilty.
There's enough doubt. Especially like the one thing that the judge pointed out at the trial, right? When Tongo gave his evidence, and it was read, one of his early interviews was read out loud, saying that Tongo said in the interview that Shrien threatened to hurt him if he didn't do it. And then at the trial, he's like, no, I never said that. And the judge was like, it's recorded on your interview, right? on this interview transcript. You said it. He's like, oh no, if that's in there, then the investigator must have put it in there. Whoever typed it, put it in there. Because I didn't say that. This is what he told the judge at Shrien's trial.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was very bad. Yeah, it's very bad.
Yes, I think that leaves Cape Town in a tricky place as far as attracting tourism dollars.
Yeah.
It leaves Annie's family, of course, any victim's family is left, of course, in a terrible place. They have no answers. They have answers, I guess, but as far as I know, Annie's family really doesn't feel like justice was served. They were anticipating and expecting Shrien to get prosecuted and face jail time or something. Is my understanding. I mean, they seem to just not be satisfied with that outcome. But of course, even if they had that outcome, still their daughter's dead, and they expected a very bright future for her, and for Shrien as well, and just their marriage, and to experience that kind of loss. It's such a happy time in their life. Their daughter just had got married with this great ceremony. But to experience at that time, I can only imagine kind of pain, how that compounds given the circumstances of it, and of course the long drawn out trial and extradition and all that kind of stuff. And then, and then I imagine it just feels so unsettled.
And one of the differences, I think, between the South African justice system and the American, which actually impacted Anni's family quite a bit, was in the United States, investigations happening, the family of the victim is very rarely brought into specifics of the case. Like the prosecutors and investigators try and keep as much to themselves as possible. They don't share very much until like it goes to trial. In South Africa, though, they have a law that says that the family has to approve of any plea deals that occur in a case like this. So Anni's father had to approve of the plea deals made for Mbalombo and for Kwabe and for Tango. And so the investigators had to bring him into their confidence. They had to tell him, like, this is what's going on. And they had to lay out the case for him. And they did so with such confidence that he believed them. And because why would they lie? Why would the investigators lie? Why would they waste taxpayer money trying to follow this if they didn't? Like, that was his reasoning. And for him, I feel really, really sorry for the family, because they can't accept any story other than that, because they've been fighting for so long. They make statements that they said all they wanted was for Shrien to testify in court, to tell the truth in court, to be able to be cross-examined. That's all they wanted. Because and they said, like, if he had gotten on the stand and been cross-examined and still been truthful and held to those stories, they would have accepted an acquittal. But they don't believe that he would have. They believe that he would have been tripped up and would have been convicted in the court. And I really think that they really weren't going to accept any verdict other than guilty and jail time.
If I'm not mistaken, I can't remember the father's name, Annie's father's name, but he wrote a book or an article or was interviewed or something, and I I read a statement he made to a reporter, and I think he said that he accepted that Shrien was innocent, but he was mad about the affairs, the secret life. Right. Yeah, and basically saying that wasn't very polite. But I think he does believe that he's innocent.
Okay. He did say at one point that if he'd known that Shrien was bisexual before Anni got married, he wouldn't have let them get married.
Yeah. So this was a tragic case. Really, it was of course the worst for Anni. Right, she lost her life. Mm-hmm. Shrien's life was definitely changed negatively. I think he's always going to have that dark cloud over his head. There's no escaping it. He was a suspect in a murder.
Right.
There's no way to polish that. And then, of course, you have a number of the South African men there who one's dead and one's free. So I guess things worked out kind of for him. Yeah. And then two in prison. They might be out by now. I don't know though.
One of them might be out by now.
Yeah.
Right. For Shrien, or anybody in this kind of situation where they're not in jail, things worked out more or less for him. Black, kind of a cloud over their head, but nonetheless, my understanding anyway is that he's in a relationship with a man now, or was recently.
I think it's 4 years after.
4 years
after his trial was when they got together. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I wonder how that kind of thing goes. Like, obviously, this is a very public case. Everyone in South Africa would have known about it. Probably a lot of people in London, surrounding area, would have known about it. Probably even people in maybe the area where their family's from in India might have known about it. So I wonder how that goes. Like, you meet someone and you're like, oh, yeah, I know about your history. I know about your past. I know about this murder investigation, the trial, and how you kind of publicly came out as a result of this. And, I wonder how that stuff goes, because obviously there's people out there who don't believe he's innocent, people who do. But I imagine that it's tough not only for Shrien to move on and just kind of live his life and move on from the things that happened, but also for other people in relationship with him, like, just kind of probably have a lot of questions about that. That could put some serious strain on any kind of relationship or any kind of friendship or anything moving forward, because it might be difficult to just live a normal life in any regard as a result of something like this. So I don't know. I have more questions with that than I have answers, and I'm just curious how that goes for someone in a situation like this.
Yeah, I think it definitely, again, negatively affected his life forever. He'll never escape it.
Right.
He has money, though, right? He has money and seems to be happy now, so he'll move on the best he can. But yeah, what a devastating case. All started, maybe because Shrien wanted to go into this bad area, or was poor about selecting his taxi driver, or I don't know. I mean, Tango probably just drove him there, right? But maybe some more situational awareness. I don't know what could have prevented this. I'm trying to think, what could he have done? What's the lesson for Shrien or for Annie to avoid this?
Well, the lesson that the Tourism Bureau didn't want people to learn was don't go to South Africa.
Yes, yeah.
They didn't want people to take that. And there are people in South Africa even today who swear Shrien got away with murder, that he's 100% guilty. And a lot of that comes back to the culture in South Africa. They don't want the rest of the world to see them as this criminal nation where, if tourists go there, they're just going to get killed. And so it had to have been someone outside bringing this evil thing into their midst, regardless of the fact that all of the people who actually perpetrated the crime were from South Africa. If it hadn't been for her husband hiring them, they never would have done it.
Right. They're just innocent folks, mind their own business. Somebody comes and waves $2,000 in front of them. Well, what are they going to say? Are they going to turn down murder for hire? That's ridiculous. Of course they're going to be tempted by that. It's a tough argument from the Tourism Bureau's point of view.
I think maybe a lesson that we can learn here and apply to other areas is about maybe reputation or how reputable something is. So if you're, obviously he chose someone who was more local, Tango, to be their kind of tour guide, taxi driver. But they also had the option, more expensive option probably, but they also had the option of a more perhaps reputable service from the hotel. More money, but also more reputable, and also maybe someone that they could kind of answer to. So if something went wrong, well, they were hired through the hotel, now they have someone to answer to. You could perhaps relate this to other areas too, like if, I don't know, some kind of other service, maybe you're buying a house, a real estate agent, and well, here's someone who's reputable. Maybe they take more commission or something like that, but they're more reputable versus someone who is not, has a worse reputation or something. Oh, but I could save some money with them. And of course you take your chances, right? Going with reputation versus cheaper option. We can apply that, I'm sure, to many different areas, situations. But you got to understand the risk of what you're doing at the same time. And I would think if you're in a country you've never been to, you're not familiar with, or at least you're not, I don't remember if they had been there before or not, but somewhere you're not familiar with, especially if there's a chance that there might be some bad areas. Maybe they didn't know that, of course, but maybe you weigh that option. Like, yeah, I might spend more money, but I might be safer, might have a better experience, and might be less of a headache, less stress, maybe things like that. So I'm sure there's other areas you can apply that to as well. But the first thing that comes to mind is like people that are providing a service to you. I think of like medical services as well. I would hope that there wouldn't be any kind of shady medical providers out there, but I'm sure there are.
Dr. Nick Riviera.
Oh, there are.
I'm sure that's something to...
Dr. Nick Riviera, right?
Dr. Nick Riviera.
I'm sure that's something to consider as well. But of course, that's why we have licensure too. That's why we have licensure too, because that's someone we have to report to. If there's a problem, we have someone who's going to keep us accountable. Versus if we weren't licensed, not much that's going to keep us accountable other than the law, of course. But
There's very few laws regulating.
Yeah.
It's the Wild West when it comes to unlicensed counselors.
Right.
Life coaches, they sometimes call themselves.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of
That's how they
I think there's
skirt
a
that.
lot of areas to view that in.
So there's a famous, a relatively famous case of Henry Van Breda, which I covered before, but I think it's only on Patreon. I don't think I released it publicly, but it was a case of this kid was from Australia, like his family was from Australia, but they lived in South Africa. I think his father worked for an Australian bank that had a branch there or offices there or whatever. And they lived in it was the south, somewhere in like the southwestern part of South Africa. So in a nutshell, this kid wiped out his whole family with a knife or something. It was a knife or something like that. Attacked them. It was clear he did it. There's no question he did it. They were all in the house. He was the only one that was alive, right? Blood everywhere. Okay. He said like someone else, like his father attacked his brother and he intervened or something, but it was clear he did it.
I think it was Jeff Pelly that did it. Actually, wasn't that the name of the guy in the other case? Was it Jeff Pelly?
Oh, right.
The one like he was the only one that
right, and he just
survived. Yeah, I think it was actually him. Yeah.
So he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But what I find interesting is like he was out on bail. Like that system is much different. He was free on bail for quite some time, even though he's charged with multiple first-degree murders. And there was still people that doubted he was guilty because the area they were in is very nice, but surrounded by areas that weren't nice, and the had high security. Like there was I think bars in the windows, alarms. I think they might have guns in there. There was a lot of security, armed guards in the area, and people were still like, no, they could have broken in and killed the whole family. They were still like, even though he wasn't even saying that, he wasn't even saying somebody broke in. There was still people like, no, it's South Africa, and we saw the same thing with Oscar Pistorius, right? In that case, the Blade Runner, a famous Olympic athlete. Who shot a Steam Camp, I think her name was, his girlfriend. And they were in an apartment, second story or something, and she went to the bathroom, allegedly, like that's what he says. She went to the bathroom. He went to the bathroom and shot her through the door. And he thought that she was still in bed and there was a burglar in the bathroom. That's what even though she was in the side of the bed that was closer to the bathroom, either way, he was convicted, and I forget what he got. He did some time. But there was still people like, no, that was South Africa. Somebody definitely could have broke in the bathroom. Like there's people who believed him just because it was so dangerous. I think he also had some problems where he went out in public and shot a gun. I think he shot out like a traffic light. He had a number of firearms. But again, that makes sense for how dangerous the area where he lived. So imagine like where a murder like Henry Van Breda or Pistorius could occur, and there's still people like, nope, think about what you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, there's not many areas in the United States, even the rough areas, where you would see a crime like that and think somebody broke in.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
So I think that Shrien, I think he might have had a little bit of naivete because he's, from living in London, not as much experience with that kind of environment of some of the places in Cape Town, but also think that he had kind of an idea that money breeds loyalty, right? Mm-hmm. If he did pay Tongo for his services, it would have been like, hey, how much money do you make in a month? 30,000 Rand? I'll pay you that for a week. And, and when your week's done, like 30,000. Done. And then he expects, he expects like, I'm paying this guy all this money, loyalty to me, at least for as long as I'm paying him. So he didn't think twice about it after that. Now, the alternative is that he hired Tongo to kill his wife and ended up getting away with it. But it really doesn't strike me as that. It seems to me that there was that Tongo was opportunistic. That he saw an incredibly wealthy guy, figured he could get him robbed for a bunch of money from just the physical stuff he has on him, and then ransom his wife back to him. And then that part went really wrong. Mm-hmm. And to protect himself, he made a deal to point a finger at a person who didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, well, they were criminals, right? So that
to me just seems more likely and less assumptive than Shrien was unhappy in this marriage that he'd only been in for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, what about his history points to him being a killer? Right? He had no criminal history, either to Annie, as I understand it.
Right.
It wasn't like he was a violent offender in the UK, and all of a sudden
That we know of.
right, yeah, we don't know of that. And he gets to South Africa, and all of a sudden he's like Al Capone. Like it doesn't make any sense.
I had also heard that we were talking about cultural things before. That maybe in his, maybe in a through a lens of a cultural expectations, that maybe killing someone or death would have been perceived by some, certainly not most, but by some, as a better option than divorce or coming out as homosexual or bisexual. So, I mean, maybe that's a possibility. Maybe not a likely possibility, but maybe it's a possibility. Maybe that had crossed his mind, like, I don't want to face my parents with my sexuality, or I don't want to face our families with divorce. And so this maybe, if it happened that way, could have been an easy way out or easier way out. I don't know if that's true. That's certainly speculation, but it's been brought up by people, and I don't know. It's an interesting way to look at it, because maybe there's some truth to that for some people. Like, I'd rather commit a crime. I'd rather face death, or somebody else face death, than have to face my family with these things that are culturally just so wrong.
Yeah, there was definitely some motive. He had some motive, and he did act oddly. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's enough, but
right.
Yeah,
it does seem awfully assumptive, though, of the investigators to assume that that because he is of Indian descent, that his family would have those ultra-conservative views on his sexuality or on divorce. Sure. There's a large portion of the Indian population that just accepts that divorce is a thing. Mm-hmm. There's a much smaller portion of the population that still engages in arranged marriages. Mm-hmm. than there used to be. And even amongst arranged marriages, it's known like most of those are going to end in divorce. Something like 70% of the arranged marriages end in divorce. So it's a very common thing. It just seems like assuming that it's from one of those like super traditional cultures where he can't get a divorce. Well, why not? And why wouldn't he, why would he go through with the wedding other than the family pressure? And if the family pressure was there, he had enough money of his own that he could have just like disappeared, or mm-hmm. said, I don't have to care about what you think anymore, and just run off. There, Lord knows there are any number of stories of wealthy people who have taken money and just run off because their family didn't approve of what they did.
Yeah, he was much wealthier than Annie's family. Mm-hmm. There's a huge difference between those two families. She was really stepping up in terms of massively in terms of wealth. Right. That might have also been a factor why she stuck it out
to
the end. Not that she thought that would be the end, but she stuck it out that long.
So a lot of possibilities. I mean, a lot of speculation here, of course, too. We, like you said, Mike, we don't know at least I don't know, the family's stance on cultural matters like that, and how conservative or not they may not have been, or even if they were or weren't, anybody's perception of how those things might turn out if he were to get divorced, his perception of how that might turn out versus reality of what his family might be expecting, or so there's a lot of possibilities for that. And of course, we'll never have any answers for it, but it really speaks to me anyway, speaks to what somebody's perception of a situation is versus reality. Like, they may perceive this is going to be really, really bad, turn out really, really bad, when in reality, maybe nobody really cares about it. But of course, we'll never know.
Oh, that kind of catastrophizing is actually very common, as we know in therapy. I count on, it would take me both hands to count the number of clients I have right now who engage in this catastrophizing
all the time.
Of tiny things just all the time. So, yes, I believe that could have been his thought process. But from the way he was acting on the CCTV with her and with the way it just doesn't strike me as what his thought process was at the time. Mm-hmm. He wasn't kind of like, you'd expect somebody who's like really unhappy in that marriage to be kind of like hands off, to be like arm's distance most of the time. But no, they were like, he was taking every opportunity to get close to her, to pull her in for photos and for pictures. And they were sitting close together in booths and he was leaning in and kissing her all the time. Like it seemed to be very much a very affectionate relationship at the time. That doesn't strike me as somebody who's just unhappy with being in the marriage.
Yeah. So a complicated case. I think there's a lot of lessons hidden in the case of Anni Dewani, and I think it's just you have to be careful when you travel. Stranger in a strange land. Extra caution.
Robert Heinlein. Stranger in a Strange Land. Mm-hmm. Written by Robert Heinlein.
Yes, you have to be extra mindful of what's around you and the good neighborhoods, the bad neighborhoods, and probably avoid entering into any type of murder for hire situations.
Probably.
I think that's just a good idea for life in general. Is like that could be like rule 1A. Like, don't go to prison. Don't engage in murder for hire and plots.
Don't do things that are going to get you in prison.
Right.
Yeah. It seems like all around good advice.
So the number of times per day that I have someone come up, hey, murder for hire, and I just have to turn it down.
You just have to say no, like say no to drugs.
Say no to murder for hire.
Say no to murder for hire.
Yeah, if that was the DARE program, I don't know what you would call say no to murder for hire. I guess we'd have to come up with a new acronym for that. But
Mayor.
But I should probably be taught in schools too. I don't know. Might have the same.
It's one of those life lessons you don't really think needs to be taught in school. Like, don't hire people to kill other people. I don't know. Maybe we should be teaching that right alongside, actually balancing a checkbook or learning how to iron a shirt.
It's going to be on that same list. Life lessons.
Should be.
Not murder for hire. Right.
Yeah. Let's teach kids how to do their taxes and not murder people. Mm-hmm. Ideally, that should be what you learn out of school.
So, any final thoughts on Anni Dewani before we wrap up?
Yeah, I got one. So whatever the South African Tourism Bureau or whatever they call it there, whatever they may or may not have been up to make South Africa seem appealing, I'll say maybe prior to this discussion, it worked on me because my perception of South Africa has always been, for no good reason, by the way, but has always been that it's a nice place. That, if I had the opportunity, that I would like to go there. And there's definitely, I definitely have met people who went to South Africa, obviously the nicer parts, and were like, this place is great, it's beautiful, a lot of great places, all that. But that's probably my only reason why I have that perception. I've never looked it up. I can name Johannesburg and Cape Town. Those are the only two places in South Africa I can name. And that's all I know about it. And my perception was a positive one. Now, of course, it's changed. I recognize that there's bad areas everywhere. I didn't think about the bad areas, though, but now I do. There's a good chance I'm never going to visit South Africa, to be fair. I'd like to. It'd be nice, but but I still have a positive opinion about it. Because maybe there's more good places than bad. I don't know. But I'm definitely going to avoid the bad places. I know that for sure. I'm going to avoid hiring a taxi driver and having that same person be my tour guide. I'm going to avoid that for sure.
That wise.
So at this point, through me just talking, now I think I have to visit South Africa. Like after just going through all this process in my mind. So I might not be here next week. I might just be in South Africa. I don't know. That might happen. Yeah,
we'll keep an eye out for the news in South
headlines.
Africa. Keep an eye on the headlines. It might be another murder for hire plot.
That's why I'm going there. Really.
My final thoughts on this particular one. I came down on the side of Sri Anni Dewani didn't do it. Like that he didn't have anything to do with it, because it's much, much simpler explanation that Tongo saw an opportunity to make a ton of money by hiring these people to do this thing. Because the great part about that plot of like having Anni kidnapped and then ransoming her back was that eventually he gets his transport back, he gets his van back, and he still then gets paid by Shreen, so he's making money hand over fist with this whole thing. But at some point, it is entirely likely that, and most likely, Kwabe wanted to take advantage of the situation and wanted to take advantage of Anni and tried to move in to do a deed, and she fought back, and he ended up shooting her.
Yeah, it was an unusual angle for a homicide. It might have been just wrestling with a gun.
Yeah, so some of the forensics indicate that she was in kind of in a position like this, where the gun was in between her chest and arm when it went off, and that there were significant powder burns on the back of her arm and on her chest that indicate that that's where it had to have been. It had to have been pressed up, which is why the statement by Kwabe that Ngene fired from the front seat couldn't possibly be true, because he would have been like far too far away to have had that particular set of systems happen. So it just seems like somebody got overzealous and wanted to have something that they really didn't need to.
It may not have been part of the original plan.
And probably wasn't part of the original plan. Yeah. And unfortunately, Anni got shot and killed, and then the whole ransom thing is done. And in order to try and save themselves, Tongo came up with a plot to blame it all on Shreen so that they could get all these plea agreements, which actually ended up working out for Mbolombo and for Tongo the most.
And for the hotel receptionist. Yeah.
And technically it worked out for Kwabe as well, because he didn't get life in prison either. Ngani was the only one that it didn't work out for. And he was kind of the patsy of it all. I think that his statements were probably the more truthful of all of the ones of the conspirators involved. And as far as South Africa goes, my initial opinion of South Africa is actually formed from like Lethal Weapon 2.
Diplomatic immunity.
It's just been revoked. And then some other cultural things. District 9 is a great sci-fi movie. I think it's an amazing sci-fi movie.
Yeah, underrated.
Very, very underrated. But the thing I do like about South Africa is actually the accent. I really do like a nice South African accent. It's pretty good. But I've never really had a desire to go there, especially because apartheid was a thing that I can remember. And I tend to not go and visit places where there's huge amounts of cultural racism just ingrained in a place. I visit my parents in North Carolina, but we kind of stick to certain backwoods areas where there aren't very many people. I try not to go into some of the other areas. And South Africa is just one of those places that like it makes the American South look like downright liberal when it comes to some of that. I mean, it's even down to like, lighter shades of dark skin looking at darker shades going, I'm superior to you. Yeah, like it's still so much more stratified and racist there that it's just, I have no desire. That's my understanding from being in America. I could be wrong at this point. It is 2022. Lethal Weapon was in the 1980s. So I could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe somebody, we had a number of, actually I think Dr. Grande, I think you released a video about this, and I think there was a number of comments on your video from people from South Africa. And so maybe somebody watching this from the area or familiar with South Africa might be able to give some insight into what it's like currently in terms of that kind of climate.
I'd be more than happy to learn.
Yeah.
If I'm completely off base, I'd be more than happy to learn.
Yeah. My guess is like any country, it's got good and bad areas. Like if somebody was unfamiliar with the United States and they said, and I've heard people say this before, like, oh, the United States is really dangerous. The United States is a big place.
The United States is much, much bigger than South Africa.
And there's a lot. There's very safe places all the way, all the way to very dangerous places. There's everything in between.
Right.
So to say a whole country is as bad as there are safe places of South Africa and very dangerous places. I think probably just the proportionality is.
I'm sure. I think the Kruger National Park is probably an incredible and mostly safe place, except for maybe the animals that live there.
And they probably won't try to shoot you.
They probably won't try and kidnap and shoot you. You're right.
Do they engage in any kind of murder for
There
hire?
might be some carjacking, though.
I doubt you're going to find an animal in Kruger National Forest that's going to be in for murder for hire. I think they teach them well.
They teach that in school.
They teach that.
Say no to murder for hire.
Right?
Yeah, but like I said, carjacking. I could see those animals coming up and be like, get out of here. I'm getting in that seat. Yeah, put their horns or whatever they got through there.
Intimidation techniques, right?
Yeah. I never realized, I was doing research on the video, I never realized that swordfish can penetrate boats
Really?
and sink them.
Wow.
That's swordfish. They're one of the fastest fish in the ocean. That proboscis is actually really sharp and really hard.
Incredible.
They can swim really fast, and
I figured they could damage a boat, but they can actually, on occasion, sink a boat. It's incredible.
Next time I see a swordfish, like on somebody's mantle or something, like I caught it, I always thought that was cool. It's an impressive looking thing. But now all I'm going to be thinking about is, did that fish sink a boat? And now I'm that much more impressed.
sorry, every time I see one of those hanging up on a wall, I think, can I sword fight with that thing? Hold the tail.
Is that a functional sword? You can really
I
use
think it's
that?
functional. Is it functional? Is that a hardened blade on that thing?
Still safer than the lightsaber fish.
Yes, very much
That
so.
thing just cut right through steel.
So there's a 90% chance that if lightsaber was actually real, and if somebody got a hold of it, there's a 90% chance there would be immediate self dismemberment.
Yes.
Of something, like somebody turn it on and
The first time they do like a
Something's coming
twirl,
off.
like
something's coming off.
I'm going to give that one 100% chance if you're trying to twirl it that you're done. Yeah.
I mean, Kruger National Forest, that's got a lot of the animals. Things like lions and elephants and things. Yeah, some of them are dangerous, but I don't think you're going to be able to hire a lion to kill someone.
not for 15,000 rand.
Not
Right,
for
they're
15,000
certainly
rand.
not, right.
They're going to charge at least 40.
They are much better at business. I know that for
At
sure.
least. That's the main thing.
That's the real reason you won't find murder for hire among animals. They are so much more business savvy.
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
It's cutthroat out there. They got to fight tooth and claw for everything they get. It's wild.
It's wild.
Yeah. So
It's interesting that we're talking about the $2,000 essentially, like 15,000 rand. I was just watching another a case in the United States. Dr. Kmeyer or something like that. I can't remember. It was a murder for hire plot. He hired someone to kill his wife and paid that guy $50,000 for murder for hire.
okay.
That guy didn't want to do the deed himself, so he tried to hire somebody else to do it for him. And he ended up paying the other guy $10,000. And that guy was just like a junkie. He was just like, okay, like I can get so much smack with this. Like I'll do it. And he actually did. And like that's still way more than what these guys would have gotten out of this. But I think the number 15,000 ended up being because that was the price of going to be the price of the helicopter ride or something like that. Or a deposit on something that they were working on.
So maybe Tongo took that amount thinking, I know he has that.
Right. Tongo knew that he had that on him.
So now there's subcontractors involved in murder for hire plots.
Well, yeah.
And I don't know how you report that on your taxes. I mean,
It's definitely a 1099.
It's got to be a big problem there.
It's definitely an independent
Can
contractor.
you take expenses for that? Like I
Is
used
travel part of that?
I used a cartridge and I had to shoot a few times. I used a few cartridges.
Making the zip gun was hard. Can I get reimbursed for the parts of that?
Mileage, things like that.
It's got to be part of it.
Yeah. So anyway, so my thoughts on it are just that you have to be careful when you go other places. But there's good and bad everywhere. And I am curious about South Africa too. I might research a little more. I've covered a few cases there. There aren't a lot of murder cases or criminal cases in general that become too popular from South Africa. I guess because it's small. You know, it does seem like they have a lot of murder. To be fair to them,
And the one neighborhood has a murder every 2 days. I mean, that does seem to be a significant murder rate.
Yeah.
I just saw that Johannesburg is considered a mega city, I guess maybe with the population or the density of the population. So there's more. I never really thought about the population of South Africa. So it seems like there's certainly a lot of people there. And I saw a picture of Johannesburg too. And again, not anything I've ever thought about, but it seems like just a very big city, very built up and a lot of houses and or businesses, just buildings there. So yeah, there's seems to be a lot more to it than I would have ever considered.
Looks like almost 60 million people. I'm surprised it's that much. Yeah, very surprised. I thought it would be quite a bit smaller than that. Not that much smaller than the United Kingdom.
Right.
So yeah, always a lot more to learn, right?
Yeah.
On any country or anywhere in the world. So that's what we'll wrap up this video. Any ideas for items?
So actually thinking of an engagement ring. Like I'll blow it up, make it pretty big. Oh, speaking of, we have our newest addition to the table. This is the teeth for Richard Ramirez. And I realized when I was doing the paint job that I left too many teeth in there. Before we get any comments on this, I do want to say I did not have access to his dental records, so this is not an exact representation of his actual mouth. I just wanted to make it look like really nasty and just messed up teeth, and I think I accomplished that pretty well.
Are you implying that you didn't go to his dentist?
I did
find his records?
I did not go to his dentist. I did not request his dental records from anywhere. It is not meant to be. It's just meant to be representative, not to be an exact model. just putting that out there.
Well, there goes all our subscribers.
Everybody's going to hate me for that one. Engagement ring, blown up engagement ring, maybe. And just because it's being South Africa, maybe a lion or lion head.
You could do a Volkswagen minivan, even.
I don't know. We already have a van for
Gabby Petito.
Petito.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that would be redundant.
Which at this point we have only one update on Gabby Petito. We haven't actually mentioned that prior, and that was that the FBI released a statement that they went through the located notebook for Brian Laundrie, and they stated that there are written indications that are basically confessions from
he confessed.
Brian that he said that he did it. That he killed Gabby Petito, and then he took his own life. Is what it looks like.
Yeah. So that pretty much moves the population from 99.99% sure to 100% sure. But it's nice to remove all the doubt.
Yeah.
Sure.
It wasn't an accident that did it to herself. It was something like that. It wasn't like they were fighting and tripped on something or whatever. I think we already knew, though, she was murdered.
Yeah.
But yeah, he took, I guess, a small measure of accountability in writing. Yeah. It's something, you know.
Yeah.
Life in prison would have been a better end to that.
Engagement ring or a CCTV camera.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, small CCTV. There was so much of the prosecutors, investigators relying on the CCTV from the Cape Grace Hotel that I think that's kind of representative of the case as well. This little CCTV camera or the diamond engagement ring.
Okay.
Nice.
Throw that out there.
So please vote on those two items in the comments. And any other comments, please put in there about this case or other cases or really anything. We'll be back pretty soon with another murder part and alien lizard humanoids and some other products we're working on as well. Yeah. Other parts.
Yeah. We might have the question part.
Question part, movie part.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm working on a different format for the movie part. See if we can spice that up a little bit and make it a little bit different. It's probably going to be a unique me project, just me talking about movies and mental health stuff.
Nice.
I know, Jeff, you have stuff going on as well.
Yeah, just doing some individual videos my intention, excuse me, my intention there is to focus more on the victims in those cases and kind of where do they go from there. So some different stuff and trying to really play on, things that interest us the most, perhaps.
I do hope you're referring to surviving victims.
I am because the ones that didn't survive.
The ones that didn't survive, we know pretty much where they're going.
Nowhere. Right. That's true. Yeah. I did make sure I put surviving victims in anything that I wrote.
Okay.
So
Just making sure.
although there's a good chance that I'm going to slip up and be like, the victims. Well,
Really, all the victims?
all of them? You sure?
There's going to be comments.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting products coming out that we'll be posting on this channel.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing better. Getting in here, we had some troubles before we talked about just with everything. So,
The holidays and early January was just a tough time, but we're back at it.
Yeah.
And we hit 10,000 subscribers recently.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a big milestone for
that's
this
awesome.
channel. I think that's a long ago milestone for your channel. But
yeah, it really, 10,000 is incredible.
Yeah.
Especially considering how long, haven't been doing this that long.
Yeah. A little bit more than 6 months, I guess.
Is that what it is?
6 or 7 months, I think.
something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so very good. So again, please put any comments in there. We read every one. Certainly appreciate them. We'll be back soon with more episodes. Thank you so much.